Hi, I want to give you a nice warm welcome here today as we move into another episode. So, this episode is directly tied to the one before it. Both are about a topic called high functioning anxiety. If you didn't listen to the other one, you don't have to listen to it first. But basically, the first episode talks about high functioning anxiety on an individual level. We'll speak directly to the internal experience and also just the idea, what this means in terms of nervous system, and what we are generally craving beneath it, and how we can move out of anxiety when we have masked or high functioning anxiety. In this episode, we're going to talk about high functioning anxiety as it shows up in relationship and how it affects intimacy, connection, and polarity. So just to give a little bit of a recap, high functioning anxiety is when we might look like we're doing great. We're calm, we're collected, we're handling it, but underneath we still are in survival mode. We're experiencing the symptoms of anxiety. They just don't tend to reach far enough up into our behavior or expression for people around us to guess. So what happens is we're just able to manage our image, we can manage our outward facing emotions, we can probably manage the emotional needs of others, all while kind of secretly still feeling super anxious, isolated, alone, insecure, not enough, and probably really craving release from that tension, a place or a day where we can just relax, maybe a desire to kind of hit pause on everything, and probably really craving this feeling of being deeply held, which we often seek in a relationship. And while that pattern shows up in lots of areas of life, like we talked about in the first episode of this little mini duology we have going on here, it's especially potent to fall into the high functioning anxiety behavior in romantic relationships. And the thing is, if we are constantly in the state of emotional management, we are not just hiding from our own truth, which we touched on in the first episode, but also blocking an energy dynamic that's going to affect attraction and intimacy. So as I said in this episode, we're going to talk about how that expression of anxious attachment affects relationships. And when I say that, I mean that high functioning anxiety can be a expression, a symptom, a behavior of anxious attachment. And of course, that is what we are ultimately here to work with. So one of the almost universal experiences of anxious attachment is feeling needy. Now, some people can't control that, and so it becomes very overt. They are texting constantly, calling constantly, needing to be in conversation, and other people can sense and feel the neediness, but they're unwilling to do anything about it, or they kind of suppress it. And if we have high functioning anxiety, then we are probably on the latter side. And what sometimes happens instead is you start to overfunction to avoid feeling needy. So overfunctioning is a really clever coping mechanism to manage anxiety. Anxiety being the fear of not being enough or not being worthy. So we overfunction by taking on more and more. And sometimes we do that to avoid any potential discomfort of being with what is there when we're not super busy, which is the neediness or something that might feel desperate or jealous or grabby, or like the opposite of detached, basically. And we don't want to feel that because there's some part of us that feels like it's not allowed, because we're not allowed to be held, we're not allowed to have our needs met. It feels unsafe. So we don't want to get lost in that swirl of desire, basically, or the ache of neediness. So instead we just keep ourselves super busy. And the coping mechanism of overfunctioning also tends to come with this avoidance of ever asking for support. So ultimately, this busyness is just keeping us distracted from something. And it might be different for you than it is for me, than it is for another woman that's also listening to this podcast at the same time as you, that's also on a walk or doing dishes or whatever you're doing, right? It can show up differently. And that's why it's important that we look at our own patterns and our own coping mechanisms and what they are, how they're serving us, right? So the term coping mechanism can tend to have a bit of a negative connotation to it. And I want to bring back in this teaching, which is that all behaviors are meeting a need. So it doesn't mean we're behaving in the way that we want to, but we're behaving in a way that's on purpose for some reason. Even if it's completely habitual or unconscious or coming from our limiting beliefs, it's still meeting a need. So if we look at what behavior is this need meeting for me, then we can start to uncover how can I get that met in a healthier way. Now, bringing it back to the topic here, there is a big relational cost of being the type of person who never needs anything. One thing that often happens is we become resentful of others needing us because our needs aren't getting met in the way that we want them to get met, or they're not getting met by other people. So our relationships start to feel one-sided, but the unfortunate thing about this is it's kind of like, I'm sure there's a metaphor for this, like standing in the something you created. Like, this is the garden I planted. I taught the people around me to be that way because I didn't speak up my needs, or I didn't speak up my boundaries, and I just handled everything. I didn't ask for help. So there can be a bit of an uncomfortable growth period when we start to, instead of overfunctioning, we start to settle into who we are and what we really need, which might mean that some people who have been very used to relying on you or having you show up a certain way, or being in a relationship where you're handling all the cooking and the cleaning and the housework and all of these things, and it feels super out of balance because you're also working a job, yeah, that is going to be uncomfortable for your partner when you say, I just cannot do all of this. Like, that's not fun for the other person to receive. It's a result of not speaking your truth, not honoring your boundaries, and now we also have to sit with the discomfort that it causes other people when we start to reclaim that. But it doesn't have to be a fight, and it doesn't have to come from defensive energy. And this is a whole side conversation on boundaries, which we talk a lot about in my Becoming Secure membership. There's a whole, like, so many trainings in there on boundaries and how to speak them in a way that feels loving and not defensive. So I'm not going to get too much into the boundary piece, but what I want to highlight it here is that there's just a cost. There's a relational cost of being the one who acts like she never needs anything. And this idea of I don't want to be a burden, or I don't want to put someone out, slowly turns into, why won't anyone show up for me? Why don't these people see me the way that I see them? I don't understand. Like, how are they not seeing what I need? I can see what they need so easily, right? So there's a bit of an identity trap in being the person who is really reliable. And when we start our romantic relationships on the wrong foot, in terms of we start our relationships from a place that's very chameleoning to who you think he needs you to be, then this is probably something we're going to face somewhere down the line. And let's talk about specifically how our high functioning anxiety can really mess with polarity in relationship. So polarity is just a magnetism between two people, and it's created due to a contrast. So people talk about masculine and feminine energy being that polarity, direction, flow, structure, and surrender. But if you are someone who's constantly leading, holding, solving problems, stabilizing things, you are likely showing up in your masculine. And even if you crave being met and held and chosen by someone, there's not space for that to happen if you're constantly holding the energetic pole of lead and solve and fix. And being in that energy is probably your comfort zone. It probably feels safe for you. It probably feels like this is what I'm meant to be doing because I'm earning love from him or them, but it will erode desire and trust and emotional intimacy. So one way this shows up is because without meaning to, we tend to take into a subtle or not so subtle mothering role. And this isn't because we're necessarily trying to parent the person we're with, but because this energy of holding everything and anticipating someone's needs and managing their emotions and nurturing can push us over the line of giving without receiving. And eventually it shifts the dynamic from being a lover to being a caretaker. And unfortunately, no man who wants to lead in partnership is turned on by being mothered, because they end up actually feeling like this energy of nitpicking, complaining, and no woman who wants to be met and held should have to earn her connection to her man by constantly holding the structure and making sure things get done. Another reason that this pattern of high-functioning anxiety tends to throw off polarity in relationship is that you may never let yourself or rarely let yourself be fully seen in this life by someone unless they get very, very close to you. Maybe you're more comfortable with your girlfriends than with men, for example, or a romantic partner because the stress of rejection is just too high. So we tend to show people our useful, available, agreeable self, and that feels like what is required in order to hold on to the connection. And I really get it. This is so hard when it feels like a relationship is hanging in the throes of who you are and if you're good enough. But the truth is that tension that happens in dating when there's lack of commitment and it's kind of like this situation vibe has just as much, if not more, to do with him and where he's at than it has to do with the way that you're showing up and if you're bringing enough to the table or doing enough for him or being available enough or remembering the thing he likes. It's really seriously so not about that, but I can totally take myself right back to those moments of just feeling so on edge and so graspy for commitment in the relationship from someone who wasn't going to give it to me. And to just really open our subconscious a little bit deeper here, what's often happening is we are subconsciously attracting people who won't push us to be vulnerable, who won't push us to be super open and soft, because it's much more convenient for that type of man if we are just helpful and agreeable and available and around, and your independence is convenient for them. But it's not going to create the type of relationship that you want, okay? It's creating a type of relationship that hurts, but in some ways feels comfortable and safe. So let's talk about some very practical examples in dating and how we maybe want to practice operating instead. So what might happen is you're waiting an extra long amount of time to text them back, even though you actually just want to text them back because you don't want to seem clingy. Or maybe you never suggest plans because you read something on Instagram and you want him to lead, but you're also afraid of seeming too eager, so you're not going to suggest that you do this thing. You might not be able to communicate your disappointment when he flakes or underdelivers or fumbles, but you're still spiraling in private. Or you might be rationalizing red flags because you think he just needs time or he's been through a lot, so you understand why he is the way that he is. So what that is, it's all performative. It's all posturing. And that means that we're creating a bond that is through performance and not just authentic presence. And with that, this person is not really getting to know the real you. They're getting this curated version. And when we're bringing that, as I said, we attract typically avoidant people who like our independence because it's convenient, but they're never really going to meet you emotionally. So instead, what we need to practice is being willing to let our nervous system feel vulnerable without shutting down. And this doesn't mean we are just, wide open to the next person we meet and we're telling them all our secrets and all our trauma, right? There's definitely an art to being contained. But it does feel different. It's connection with that one layer of wall down. It's also being able to express yourself without over-explaining. This is such a habit that lots of women have, myself included, no, I actually can't come, and this is my 15 reasons why, or no, I can't do that, but this is why, I have a really valid excuse, and of course, in some ways, it's very innocent. We want to not hurt someone's feelings, but an ultimate form of self-respect is really just being able to name our truth and just put a period at the end of the sentence. So that might be your practice. And another one in terms of dating, when we're trying not, right? We're trying not to bring our old habits and our old patterns into relationship because it throws off the dynamic in a lot of ways. What we need to do is notice how people actually make you feel. How do they make you feel instead of focusing your energy on getting them to like you? Just common, right? We want to prove to him that I'm worthy of his commitment and his energy and all these things. And we kind of glaze over how we actually feel. How anxious do I actually feel in this? How not held do I feel in this? Am I noticing where I feel dropped in his behavior instead of just overlooking at it to try and prove myself? And another practice that we can bring into really all of our connections, but whether this is a new dating partner or someone you've been with for a lot of years, just asking yourself in little moments, am I self-regulating right now to stay small? Am I self-regulating to control and suppress? Or am I self-regulating to stay open? Because in any moment, we can actually feel within ourselves, am I open here and am I closed? And now this can open up a whole conversation about triggers and conversation and defense systems and fight or flight. But those are the moments and the interactions that we have with partners or with potential partners where our body is really talking to us a lot. And so when we can just tune into our body, am I open? So another way to start working with our body is to just check in and just asking, am I holding myself in a way for more love to flow through me? Am I posturing in a way to make them think or feel a certain way? Am I holding something back, and can I just breathe into wherever that is in my body and maybe let a little bit more of my truth come through? And as we do all this, we have to really unlearn a lot of perfectionism and control patterns. And trust me, I'm still working on it, and I've so been there. And in that, we have to let someone in, which means creating real intimacy, which can be very scary, even though when you have the anxious attachment system, it can feel like it's a thing you want. I just can't get close enough to them. We have to let that closeness also open something in us. And when we do that, it's going to be imperfect, and it's going to feel vulnerable, and it's going to come with questions and fears. And that's the part of creating a real connection with someone. And when you can open that up and feel where the other person's at, then you can get a true reading on, can this person hold me in the way that I want to? Does this person feel trustworthy in my body? And leading from that level of self-connection is going to drive us towards much, much healthier partners than when we are leading from our high-functioning anxiety, which is just, who can I try and prove my worth to? AKA probably being attracted to the person that is not going to validate you in the way that you want, because your deeper subconscious limiting beliefs that you are not worthy are actually leading the show, instead of your wiser higher self that knows that she's worthy of a powerful love and knows she has so much love to give. And that is the part of us that we want to be able to lead, the centered, secure part. And when you lead from there and you're no longer performing your worth and you're not managing every interaction, something really will start to happen. The kind of men that you attract will begin to change, because when we stop broadcasting, I've got it all handled, then we actually make space for someone who wants to offer something to us, for someone who wants to give us something to receive. When you stop curating your needs to make someone else comfortable, you invite someone who wants to meet you where you actually are. And when you do this, then you will stop attracting avoidant or emotionally unavailable men, because those dynamics would need you to be overfunctioning to survive. And if you're no longer available to operate in that all the time, those people are just not going to be attracted to you either, because they're just mirroring an old wound pattern, and you would instead be operating from a more secure pattern. So there is a version of you that does not need to perform for love. And trust me, and I know this is maybe the hard part, there are men out there who can hold you in all of your chaos and all of your anxiety and all of your emotions. And I have a feeling that's what you actually want to feel, safe enough where there's someone who's holding even more than you are, who can hold even more than you are, so that you can soften into it. And this, again, kind of comes back to the polarity piece. If we don't make space for this, if we're unwilling to trust a man to hold that, then of course we will not open up or soften, and it will mess up the polarity a little bit, right? So final thing I'll say here is, when you can connect to this version of you that really believes and remembers she doesn't have to perform for love, that people are seeing you without you maybe even realizing. They are seeing through your walls and loving you as you are already. It's probably already happening. Then there's this sigh on a heart level, on a nervous system level, and there are men who can hold you in all of your chaos and all of your emotions. And when you trust yourself to open to that possibility, that is when that type of dynamic starts to move towards you. And this is not about collapsing into someone or being weak or dumping all your stuff on them, right? It's just like, I can soften here, I can be held here. And that is such a medicine for the woman who is used to overfunctioning and performing and overdoing and being productive and being in her masculine. And being in our masculine is required for some moments in our life, 100%, but it's likely not where anyone wants to spend all of their time, right? So if this discussion has lit up something in you and you're like, yes, I want more of this topic, I want more of this masculine and feminine polarity boundaries, I just need it all because this is the direction that I want to move in, then please come find me in the Becoming Secure membership. It's very high touch. I will be there to support you. You will see my face. You will be able to be on a live call. You will have my support. And I know that it's just so important to find practitioners that we resonate with. And there are 80,000 people that have listened to this podcast, and only a very small percent of them are really, really ready to actually go into the work and take the next step and join something that is like a community and membership where you're going to be seen and you're going to be witnessed and you're going to be pushed and guided to go those levels deeper that really make the difference. Not everyone is ready for that when they hear the episodes, but I have a feeling that you know if you are or if you're not. And I trust you in that, and I trust your decision and your ability to feel into where you're at and what you want. But the invitation is there to join us. I would really love to meet you inside and hear about what's alive for you and what's been happening and what are your desires and what do you want to move towards. And I have so many tools to get you there. Tools that you will probably not find in your talk therapy sessions, which is okay. Talk therapy is for one thing, and somatic work and subconscious work and shadow work and inner child work and the things we do in the membership are for another thing. So if you're just looking to expand your toolbox and move more into the direction of what I talk about here, then please find the link in the show notes. Of course, I'm also willing to answer any questions you may have. Until then, for everyone listening, let's take a deep breath. Feels so good. I'll talk to you soon.